the recording. Okay, welcome everyone to our March community call. If this is the first one of these that you are attending, we have them every month. They are open to all folks who are interested in being part of the IIIF community. We focus on technical discussions, interesting IIIF-enabled demos, tools, and community development projects. Before we get into deep, I have put a link to the agenda in the chat. If all of you can take a moment and open up that link and sign in at the top, it's helpful for us to know who has attended, and so that you all have a link to the notes that I'm going to try and take. Before we get into our presentation today, I want to take a moment to remind everyone that our annual conference is happening June 2nd through 5th in Leeds, UK. It's jointly hosted by the consortium and the University of Leeds. Registration is open. We have a super packed agenda for the conference this year. In addition to the free showcase and workshop happening on the 2nd, we have 2 full days of presentations and then a third full day of workshops, birds of a feather sessions, and tours. All of those workshops and tours are included with your registration, but the space is limited, extremely limited in some of those cases. So if you are interested, please register now. If you have any questions about that, you can send me an email or you can contact me on Slack. And with that, I'm going to introduce our presenters today. I'm going to hand it over first to Erin Burnand from the British Library to talk about the community development work that's happening around Universal Viewer and this newest release.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for inviting us here today. It's great to be here. It's probably a little bit overdue. My name's Erin Burnand. I'm product owner for the Universal Viewer at the British Library. And I'm based in Yorkshire, just not far out of Leeds. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in Leeds this June. I'm also chair of the steering group, and I'm joined by my fellow steering group members, Damien Katz, who's Director of Library Technology at Villanova, and Sarah Wheel, who's Head of Web Design and Development at the National Library of Wales. I've also got my BL colleagues lurking somewhere on this call. So James Misson, who is Research Software Engineer, and Lani Okaradudu, who is our Senior Testing Engineer. So we're presenting at the conference in June. We're very conscious of not repeating the content. We don't want to run out of things to say. So we're trying to keep this quite targeted. So just discussing the past 12 months and the activities that have led to our most recent release. So I'll give that update and then I'll pass over to Damien, who will discuss the release process, which is probably one of the most significant outcomes of the past 12 months and the work that's gone into the new release. And then Sarah's been acting as our Scrum Master for our community sprints. So she's going to talk you through our community board and discuss how we organise our sprints and sort of the practicalities of having to organise a Scrum team that is spread over many different organisations and countries and time zones. Then I'll give a demo of our latest version, just a quick one, and a bit of an overview of the near future activities. So it's been a really busy 12 months for the Universal Viewer community. And like all sort of collaborative projects, we have quiet periods, you have active periods, and one of the real, where the real work lies is trying to re-energise that community after these quiet periods. And one of the issues that the UV community faced was a sort of over-reliance on a certain number of individuals, which is very common, isn't it? And it's not a great place for a product to be. It's a lot of pressure on those individuals who more often than not work full-time jobs in addition to working on the viewer. And also it's not ideal for the product itself, you know, in terms of ensuring long-term sustainability, but more about that in June. So the BL team, the British Library team, we began as a product team in early spring 2024. And the British Library are by no means newcomers to the Universal Viewer. But as a team, we absolutely were. And so our strategy was very simple. We're just going to immerse ourselves in the communities, both the Universal Viewer and the IIIF communities, and we just want to learn as much as we can. And everyone was very gracious and generous with their time in supporting us to do that. So the BL team, and there's 4 of us, including myself, so that provided a much needed resource. So it's boots on the ground, really, in very simple terms. And as a community, we really had to take advantage of that straight away. and address these outstanding issues such as reliance on individuals, single points of failure, and sort of barriers to inclusion, things like that. So we had a very high level idea, I think, as a community of what our goal is. The sort of dream scenario is that somebody who's interested in using the Universal Viewer in their institution could come onto the website, visit the GitHub, and find that information, be able to raise an issue, a user story, perhaps take on a good first issue for development, find support when required. You know, these are very simple things, but they're actually quite difficult to provide sometimes. So with that in mind, what did we have to do to make that happen, basically? So we really had three areas of focus, and the most fundamental one was building that very active community, because without that, nothing else can happen. And with that, you also need a structure to support that community and ensure full transparency. So well-documented roles, responsibilities, policies, and procedures. And then alongside that, you need to make sure that your community is accessible and inclusive. And you want it to be easy for people to be involved. And this comes in the form of good documentation, good comms, you know, things like release notes, knowing where to go for support. But these are all things that take time. And that's what we just put our attention into in that sort of about summer, I think, last year. And one benefit of entering a pretty established community as newbies, as we were, as the BL team, was that you see things with fresh eyes, basically. So we could provide a bit of feedback about what we, you know, ideally would have liked, and what other people would like, you know, in our situation. And at first, it was really about identifying these tasks or sort of jobs to be done. And we started using our community board in earnest about that time to record these tasks and finding a way of working through and prioritising. So all that work was going on, and that was fantastic. As a new team, the community sprint sounded very appealing. It sounded like a place, you know, where you could learn the code, you could learn the etiquette, you know, because there is an etiquette when you learn, you know, a group of people. How to add tickets, how things are prioritised, and in quite a safe space. So we were very keen for these things to happen. You know, we were invested in this community being as active as possible too. And I know I've spoken about this before, but in case people don't know, around, I think, August last year, COGAP ran an accessibility audit of the UV. And this was part of their work on the Endangered Archives website. So they opened like a ton of issues. And at first it was quite daunting, but actually it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant because we had such a great opportunity to put this into action and do actual meaningful work. And so we arranged a community sprint, and we had a really big group at that point, which was fantastic. And the amount of work we got done was huge. But having people working on your product and investing their time in your product, you know, it comes with great responsibility. So you have to demonstrate that all this work is being put into action. And that it's going to be released and that users can use it and benefit from all these amazing new features. And this doesn't come easy, so there has to be structure around it. So I will now pass over to Damien, who was our release manager for this, and is a sort of the mastermind behind our release process.
Thank you, Erin. So yes, I'm Damien Katz from Villanova University, and I've been using the Universal Viewer for well over a decade now. I've done a little bit of development on it, but I've been more of a user. But you know, I've been aware that the community has been struggling a little bit for the reasons that Erin noted, and I've been concerned about helping to move things forward. And so a piece of that was bringing some of the experience I've gained from working in the Viewfind community, where I am very involved and am one of those people who could potentially become a single source of failure. And we've been doing a lot of work over there to grow that community and disentangle me from essential functionality, so I'm not the only person who knows how to do things. And so it was useful to bring some of that experience over to Universal Viewer, where I am more of an outsider, though, you know, a knowledgeable one, to try to help get a lot of the burden off of Ed Silverton, who deserves huge amounts of credit for doing huge amounts of work to make the viewer what it is today and is still an engaged member of the community, but who, as Aaron pointed out, also has a life outside of the viewer. So we can't expect him to do everything all the time exactly when we want him to. And one of the things that we've always leaned heavily on Ed for was making releases and doing other administrative functions for the viewer. And that meant that when somebody came and said, hey, when are you going to make another release of the viewer? Because I want this new feature or bug fix, the answer was always, Ed, and that didn't feel good for anyone. So uh, as Aaron said, I thought about this. I thought about how things have been working in Viewfind, and basically, well, first of all, it's worth noting that we did sort of an administrative sprint as a steering group to make sure that we had all of the necessary access and credentials to interoperate with all the systems that the Universal Viewer community needs. Because again, if Ed's the only one with the password, then we're just stuck. So we got all of that disentangled, made sure that everyone had the power to do what needed to be done, and then thought through a logical workflow to make releases and ensure that they are of good quality. So if anyone is interested in reading incredibly granular detail of how this all works, you can actually find it in the project's GitHub. We have a contributing document which describes, how to join the community, how to get the viewer running locally, and also this release process. But in a nutshell, the idea is that the steering group determines when we are ready to make a release. At the moment, we're tying that with the completion of community sprints because that's a logical time. We've just developed a bunch of things. We want to make them available. But, theoretically, there could be other things that trigger a release. And we always encourage anyone in the community to reach out to us if they have a need and they want our support, because that's what we're here for. But in any case, once we've determined that a release is necessary, we begin a release candidate process. So we will basically tag a release candidate. We will create a pull request representing the release candidate because we have our GitHub set up so that every pull request builds a live instance of the Universal Viewer that you can interactively test out. So this means that every release candidate is just online and easy to use automatically. And then we solicit testing from the community and from ourselves to try out this live demo on the pull request or to build it and install it locally or whatever it takes. And after a couple weeks of testing, either we will have gotten some bug reports, in which case we will fix problems, issue another release candidate, repeat the process, or everyone will say, looks great, and then we will make the release. And we have some Git branch naming conventions in place that allow us to keep track of, what is the most recent stable release, what's currently in development, what are all of the different major and minor releases that we've made. And we're setting up all of this infrastructure so that if, say, some really critical bug is discovered in the future, we have the ability to backport that bug to multiple branches and make multiple releases to support anyone who might need help. Obviously, we have limited resources. We're not planning to do that sort of thing unless it's essential, but it's always good to have the infrastructure to support flexible backporting and releasing and so forth. And that's our release in a nutshell. And as I say, you've got the document if you want more, and I'm happy to talk about it as well. And I think with that, I should turn it over to Sarah to talk about our Agile practices.
Thank you, Damon. I'm Sarah Reel. My day job is Head of Web Development at the National Library of Wales. I'm also previously Chair of the Steering Group Committee, and luckily Erin came along then and helped us out by taking that off my shoulders. I've been Scrum Master for the recent sprint, and I'm going to share my screen to start with so we can have a look at some of the community board and other devices we've been using. So I'm lucky that I have experience of running projects and being Scrum Master in my day job at the National Library of Wales. So I was lucky to be able to bring this experience into the UV. And the National Library's been a user of the Universal Viewer for, as Damon says, probably a decade now. We were also one of the original founders of the steering group. And to be able to reach the point where we have enough community support to be able to run sprints is just wonderful. We've been working with a team of really incredible, talented developers and domain experts, and a mix, as we've said, of those who are relatively new to the UV and those who've worked with the software for years and years. So we started off, I created a community board, which we thought was a really good way of bringing everybody together and everybody being able to access, and the public, everybody can publicly access this board. And specifically for our first community sprint, this is the first of 3 so far that we've had over the last year. It was specifically focused on accessibility, as we've said. So one of the first things we did was we created a column within the community board and tagged everything as accessibility. So we could see straight away the tasks we had. And as you can see, we had 35 different tasks to complete during this sprint. So to make things easier for everybody, what I did, I created a Miro board, and Miro could be your board of preference. There are other options available. And what we did, I created a single point for everybody to access all the information they needed before and during the 2 weeks. We did a Tuesday to a Thursday sprint, and the Miro boards allowed everyone to see the guidelines. So we asked things like, turn up on time, respect the time we have. There's no blaming exercises if you ask questions. Focus on the task at hand when you're in sprint ceremonies and meetings. And there's always somebody to ask if you have any problems. So we also set up a sprint resource board. So it gave you the link to the GitHub. We have the timetable, told you who the product owner was, who was Erin for the sprint. I was the Scrum Master, and linked to our profiles on Slack. We also have a dedicated community sprint channel, which is separate to our community call channel on Slack. That's the link to the community board. Gave everybody a link to a sprint calendar, which is always handy when you're dealing with people from different time zones, maybe changes in time zones during sprints, which is what we're experiencing at the moment. And then a set of accessibility resources, recommended accessibility resources. So we kicked off the sprint, and I asked everybody to note who they were, so everybody knew who people were. So you can see we've got a really good spread of people. We have 3 of us in the National Library. We have lots of people from the BL. We have people from Villanova, we have different people there's somebody from the University of Arts London, etc. So there's a good spread across different time zones, different abilities, different skills. So the first thing we decided was we asked the team, what are the outcomes of the sprint? So we decided together that our MVP was going to be a new release containing all the completed issues in the backlog. And we also wanted to include a new release of manifolds and the IIIF metadata component. So the team decided this is what they wanted to achieve in the sprint. And then I asked the team, what were their team goals? So not specifically MVP, but it's nice to know what the team feels that they would like to learn from a sprint. So we had things like confidence in submitting pull requests, creating a new group of committers, working towards a code review workflow, increasing knowledge, expand the community, and then lessons learned, and learn more about accessibility. So this is really nice to have because it gives you an idea of what our team outcomes, especially if you're trying to build a community. People may not have the confidence to do certain things. So you can see what needs to be addressed during the sprint and maybe before and after future sprints to make people more comfortable in working as a team. I also like to know how people feel. So you can see before the sprint part started, people were a little bit apprehensive, didn't know what to expect. And obviously through the medium of emoji, we find out these things. And you can see there that after the sprint, people were much happier and people really enjoyed the experience. And maybe some other emotions that we're not quite clear about. So we ran the sprint for 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks, from a Tuesday to a Thursday. And we did manage to fulfill most of our objectives. And at the end of the sprint, we did have a sprint retrospective, and that gave us a really good idea of how people felt at the end. So the first question I asked them was, what went well during the sprint? And you can see that there are areas here. There was really good introduction. People got an introduction to the product and each other. Great introduction to the community. There was really good teamwork, collaboration, really good communication. They liked Miro. We also use Slack to communicate throughout this on the community sprint channel. And there was they felt that they were really supported and the tools were useful, etc. They felt they achieved a lot. So that was a great thing to hear, that people were supported and felt like they had achieved something. I also asked what didn't go so well. And I think we've really realized that we'd overestimated what we could achieve during the sprint. For many reasons. I think one of them was that we possibly hadn't described the issues well enough. Maybe we do need to use some kind of estimation tool. That obviously working on new software with legacy software as well, with legacy issues, is that they encountered unexpected bugs and issues that maybe spiraled that issue out of control. I'm sure everybody's really familiar with that, the scope creep and that kind of thing. And yes, we generally underestimated the work needed to do that. Also, we didn't realize that maybe some of the external components, maybe some IIIF components that we needed, that were so enmeshed within our release, needed to be worked on. And they also felt that they were a new team working together. It was the first ever sprint, and maybe they needed to acclimatize and talk to each other a bit more. And then the next question was, how can we be better next time? What will we do better? So prioritization, they wanted a longer sprint, which was good. Working on cleaning up, design issues, technical debt as well, that would help. We needed, more granular issues to be able to scope things up and split up issues more finely, to describe issues better, and really have a better set of tools for working with GitHub and rules around those areas. They wanted more end user demos to be able to really engage more with stakeholders during the sprint and afterwards, and get more input from users, which is always a good idea. Maybe we could combine a demo with everybody on a community call. So we had lots of ideas. So these are the actions we wanted to take forward. So as we said, report on the sprint to a wider community, like we're doing here, community calls, blogs, etc. And then some strategic planning. How would these sprints fit into the roadmap? It's fine doing sprints, but we're not all working on this project full time. You can't run a sequence of sprints as you would in a normal project. So you get the disconnect between the sprint and the roadmap. And every time you start a new sprint, it's a mini project in itself. It's not really a sprint as we would traditionally know it. So obviously everyone has to get back up to speed during that point, and other things go on in between. So how can we do that without either overworking everybody who already got commitments to their own institutions versus keeping the momentum going between sprints? We also wanted to make a release candidate, which was one of the most important things we could do. And everyone was really, I can't think of the English word, really eager to finish off everything in progress that we'd started. So even though technically we failed the sprint because we didn't finish everything, you can never fail a sprint. It was lessons learned. And for our first ever sprint, I think it went fantastically well. The commitment that everybody showed was great. And yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for taking part in that sprint, all of those on this list here, because since then we've had 2 more sprints, and I think we're just going from strength to strength. And I will hand you back over to Erin.
Okay, right. Well, I'll just do a quick demo of the result of all this work. Hopefully it will work. So is that showing okay? I won't set it to play just yet.
Yes,
It's good
yeah.
now.
Is it all right? Good. So in the spirit of live demos never working, I've done a recording. I'm afraid it probably won't be the most elegant of recordings, but hopefully you'll all get the gist. So first of all, I'll run you through the accessibility features, which are really challenging to demo, but I'll do my best. So one of the most significant improvements that I think we made was in regards to keyboard navigation. So as a bare minimum, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines state that all functionality of content should be operable through a keyboard interface, and we weren't really achieving that. And keyboard navigation is really important. So it's beneficial to users of all other assistive technologies as well. So mouth sticks and head pointers. It benefits people with situational disabilities and accessibility needs, and even just people that like to use a keyboard. Because as usual, accessibility improvements benefit us all. So yes, so the keyboard navigation wasn't great. It would skip elements. It didn't do it in a particular logical order. One of the issues that I'm going to highlight here was that, and excuse my loud tabbing, was that you couldn't activate the thumbnail through the keyboard. So the improvement here that we've made is you can tab through and you can press enter, or you can press space and it activates it, and you can move backwards and forwards and you get a full range of motion basically. We've also improved the tabbing order. So the guidelines state that focus order must reflect the logical flow. So this is the old version here, and you can see that when you select it, it doesn't go to the first element in that box. It misses out the language settings. So the user will have to tab back, which is an unnecessary step, and it's got not good UX. So this is the new improved version, and it goes straight to the language settings. So you can just go through and select it. So hopefully that's a lot better. So really it should reflect what is on the screen, which it does now. And while we've got this settings modal up, I'll just discuss another area of work that we did, and that was improving the labels. So throughout the viewer, some of the labels were ambiguous. This one here, for example, before just said more info. You'll have seen it on the previous version, and that's what's read out by a screen reader. So it's quite confusing. It's not very helpful. It's not very helpful to anybody. More info on what? So we tried to make these labels more descriptive, and we've translated them as well into Welsh, French, Polish, and Swedish, because they're the languages we do at the moment. So I think it's important to note that this has been a massive piece of work with accessibility, but we're not seeing it as a chapter closed on it. It's not the box ticked and we move on. One of the brilliant things about having accessibility worked on as a community, and I'd go as far to say that accessibility is something that should be a community sort of endeavour, it should be the type of thing that is worked on all together, is that it gets the whole community aware of the issues, it gets buy-in, you're all invested in something when you've worked on it. So it's, for us now going forward, accessibility will be sort of embedded in every release that we do. Saying that, we've still got a lot to learn. There's things we could improve on. I think one thing that was missing was having people who use assistive technologies involved in the testing of this. And that's something that we have to improve going forward, and it's on our radar, and we will. Okay, so I'll move on to the next feature, and this is a nice one. This is image manipulation controls. So you might have an image that's maybe faded, manuscript, or a photo that's a bit blurred, and maybe adjusting contrast or brightness or saturation will make it easier to see. So here you've got, by a simple sliding motion, you can really control everything about that image. And you see, you can zoom in and maybe you'll get a better idea of it. It's also really easy to reset the settings if you've gone a bit haywire with it. And there's also the option to remember. So if you've got the really perfect combination of all those things, you can keep it and keep on returning back to it, which is really nice. So it's really full control for the user. So I think that's a really nice one. Now, this feature, we've had some really good feedback already on. This is very popular, considering it seems quite a simple change, but people seem to really like it. So you'll all know that sometimes the thumbnail labels are really long and they get cut off in this left panel. So this is a really simple adaptation that means those thumbnail panels are visible. So here you go, it's in our settings. There's the option to untick the box. And there you go, they're all clear. So the user gets to have full vision of these thumbnail labels. So yeah, that's really nice. We've had a lot of good feedback about that already. So a simple but effective change. And this one, okay, so we've tried to improve visibility of IIIF collections here. So I think there's plenty of work that needs to be done with how we display IIIF collections and how the user interacts with them on the viewer. But I think this is a really good start. So this is a new config setting, which means that the left panel defaults to index. So again, it's really simple, but really effective. I'll just show you. So select in a collection. And here we go. So it's instantly apparent that it's a collection, because when you go to the thumbnails, you wouldn't really know. So especially for new users of the viewer and of IIIF, it's really easy to see what you're actually looking at. So that is a whistle-stop tour of our I'll stop sharing, of our new features. Now that is the highlight of the ones that are probably easier to demonstrate than the others, but there's been an incredible amount of work on the new release that goes sort of beyond, you know, what you can demonstrate in a video. I think we mentioned the IIIF metadata component, which was a huge piece of work by over 20 contributors. So I will put it in the chat. I'll put a link in the chat to the new version and to the changelog. And please have a look and have a play and feedback. You know, we're inviting feedback. It'd be great to hear what people think of it. Either contact us on Slack, or even better, add to the community board. I mean, that would be lovely if you think there's improvements that could be made, or if you capture anything that's not quite right. So as Damien and Sarah mentioned, since all the work in the accessibility sprint, we've had 2 more community sprints. We had the admin sprint at the end of last year, which was one of those it's really fiddly but really important jobs of getting everything, sort of getting your house in order, I suppose it could be said to be. And then we're in the very last day of our UX sprint at the moment. So up to now, the topics of these sprints have been pretty ad hoc. We usually put them out. We'd put the last one out to vote. But I think going forward, we have recognised that there's a need for the community to at least plan for a roadmap and look to prioritising things going, you know, for the future. And topics for these sprints will probably be more targeted then, because I think that would be a really good thing for us all to do. But yeah, it is still a work in process. And I think every sprint that we have, we learn a million things more. And yeah, and with that in mind, we'd love people to be more involved in them. We tend to have people from outside the community at every sprint, and they are so valuable to be there. They offer such a different perspective, and you don't have to be a developer to be involved and to contribute meaningfully. You know, I'm not a developer. There's always quite a few sort of non-technical people on there, and you can get involved with testing. Feature requests, user stories. There's no end of things that can, you know, translations is a big one from us. So if there's any language skills, please get involved. So if you're sort of curious about community sprints and there's been something I told you about, please get in touch. Let us know how we can make it easier for people to be involved. We'd be more than happy to run you through things. And equally, if you've got ideas for future sprints, pop up on the Slack. The more ideas, the better. And I think, just to push the thing forward as well, that the benefits of joining these sprints, I've learned so much, like from Sarah, from her experience, from Damien, that you can take into your workplace. We use whiteboards now at the British Library to record things. We like them so much. So there's so many things you can take from them. So yeah, please do get involved. It's great. We're a really welcoming, fun group. So yes, Sarah, Damien, do you have anything else to add?
Nothing from me. Just thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to show you, well, a small bit of what we're doing. And please come to the lightning talk and the IIIF conference.
Yes, yes. We're here for more from us in June.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation and the look inside the process. We have some time for questions, and I will make the same offer that I make at every community call, which is if you don't want to turn your camera on and unmute, you can type your question in the chat and I will read it out for you. But if you're, you know, a little uninhibited, you should feel free to just pipe up and ask your question. Maybe I'll ask, since we have greetings from Sweden here, and you mentioned Swedish language translation. What languages are on the horizon for you, or is it more who's available and who's ready to volunteer to assist?
It's definitely, at least from my perspective, who's available and ready to assist. It's, I think, a fairly painless process to add a new language to the viewer. We just need somebody to need it, and we can work with them to make it happen.
Yeah, historically, the languages that are in the UV were based on those of us who were in the steering group who had a vested interest in having that language displayed. So I think English and Welsh were one of the first two languages, and obviously, you know, we tried to have a more diverse offering. So yes, if anybody would like to translate all our straight to volunteer to do that, we'd be only too happy. There's a translation team on this, our Slack team, translation channel, so you're welcome to join that.
Any other questions? I'll give one more minute for folks to unmute or to type. Okay, quiet group today. So as Erin said, this group is presenting at our conference in Leeds. We hope that many of you will be there to see the lightning talk. If you're not unable to travel to Leeds, we do always record the proceedings, and they'll be made available later, but it'll be, you know, a couple months after the event. Erin, Sarah, or Damien, any last places that I should direct people if they want to get involved, or dates that they should have in mind?
The community call is on the IIIF calendar. That's probably the first port of call for anybody who wants to actively join or find out what's going on. They're every month, first Thursday of every month.
Yeah,
And,
our next one is
yeah.
April 3rd.
Yes.
Okay, I'll put that link in the notes. All of the other links that everyone mentioned here will be in there as well. So if you are interested in getting involved, all that will be available for you there. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.